The dog didn't move. Not when the shelter bell rang. Not when the children giggled past. Not even when the woman across the aisle crooned, "Who's a good boy?" to a beagle wearing a red bow. He just sat there, still as stone, ears low, eyes shadowed, watching the world through the bars of kennel number 17, like someone who had already seen too much of it. Daniel Harper paused mid-step, drawn in by something quiet and magnetic. The golden retriever's coat, once the color of warm sand, was dulled by age and dust. One paw was bent slightly inward. There was a pink scar, thin and curved like a sickle, on his left flank. No name plaque. Just a yellow tag that read, "Shadow. 11 years. Special care." "Is he okay?" Daniel asked the shelter worker behind the desk. The young woman sighed as if she'd answered the question too many times. "Shadow's complicated. He's been here a while. Came in with no history, no microchip, no real behavior issues, but he's been returned 3 times. Daniel blinked. Returned. Families say he keeps trying to run away. He doesn't bark. Doesn't play. Just watches. He's never aggressive, just hard to bond with." She hesitated, then added gently, "Most people want a dog who feels like a beginning, you know? Shadow feels like an ending." Daniel glanced back at the kennel. The retriever's eyes met his. For a split second, something passed between them. Not warmth, not recognition, but a quiet intensity. Like the dog was trying to memorize his face. Daniel hadn't planned on adopting today. He'd told himself this visit was just to get out of the house. The house, silent now, every drawer echoing with memories. 2 months since he lost Emily in that crash. 2 months of drinking cold coffee and pretending the mail mattered. But Shadow was looking at him. Not pleading. Just waiting. "I'll take him," Daniel said before he could think better of it. Shadow didn't wag his tail when the kennel opened. He stood slowly, joints stiff, and walked past Daniel like he already knew the way out. The ride home was silent. Daniel kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting the dog to disappear like a ghost. But Shadow sat still, watching the trees pass like he was reading a book written in branches and wind. Back at the house, Shadow paced each room once, sniffed a corner, and settled under the living room window. That's where he stayed most of the evening, ignoring the toys Daniel placed near him. No barking, no whining, no tail wags, just stillness. That night, as Daniel lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling, listening. Nothing. Until 3:13 a.m. A low, deliberate growl echoed down the hallway. Not frantic. Not warning. More like a whisper made of gravel. Daniel swung out of bed. Shadow was sitting by the front door, head tilted, growling at nothing. Daniel flipped on the porch light. Empty lawn. No wind. No motion. He turned back to the dog. "You okay, buddy?" Shadow slowly stopped growling and glanced up at him, but didn't move from the door. Daniel knelt, running a hand through the dog's thick fur. The retriever flinched just slightly. "All right. Time for a brush tomorrow." Morning light bled through the curtains. Daniel sat on the porch steps with a mug of black coffee and a weathered brush. Shadow lay beside him, unmoving, as Daniel worked through the dog's fur. That's when he felt it, an uneven patch above the left ribcage. Not a knot. Not a burr. Something hard. He parted the fur. Beneath the layers, a strange indentation in the skin caught the sunlight. It looked like metal. Just for a second. Then the skin shifted, and it was gone, covered again by hair, like a trick of the eye. Daniel leaned closer. Had he imagined it? He brushed again, slower. A small clump of fur loosened and fell to the ground. That's when he saw it clearly. A smooth, silvery sliver, not implanted, not protruding, but somehow embedded beneath the surface. The skin around it pulsed faintly, like the metal was alive. And there, etched into the sliver, was a series of tiny numbers. Coordinates? A serial code? Daniel reached for his phone to take a picture. Shadow turned his head sharply. Their eyes locked again. Not hostile. Not afraid. But something else entirely. knowing. That evening, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the brush forgotten beside his coffee mug. The numbers were seared into his memory now. He'd tried to forget them, to explain them away, but he couldn't. His hand kept sketching them into the margins of a grocery list, onto a napkin, into the fog on the bathroom mirror. He pulled up his laptop, opened Google Map, entered the numbers. His pulse slowed as the map zoomed in. It was a forest, miles outside of town. An old conservation area. No roads, no buildings, just a pin dropped in the center of dense green. He turned toward the living room. Shadow lay by the window, eyes open, alert. Daniel stood slowly. His voice came out hoarse. "Do you know what's there?" Shadow blinked once, then stood, and walked to the door. Daniel hesitated. The air outside was unnaturally quiet. The coordinates lingered on the screen behind him. The coffee had gone cold. Everything inside him said this was insane. But the dog was waiting. Waiting like he had been waiting a long, long time for someone to come looking. The old hiking trail was barely visible beneath the overgrowth, a ghost of a path swallowed by time. Branches clawed at Daniel's jacket as he followed the signal from his phone, the GPS dot pulsing faintly over the green abyss. Shadow padded beside him without hesitation, tail low, ears twitching at sounds Daniel couldn't hear. "This is madness," Daniel muttered under his breath. Shadow glanced at him briefly, as if in agreement, and then kept walking. They reached a clearing just past a ridge. Trees fell away to reveal a hilltop pocked with moss-covered concrete. Not rocks. Not natural. Something man-made. Daniel approached the largest slab, brushing aside vines. A rusted hatch lay embedded in the ground, sealed with a keypad crusted in rust. Shadow walked directly to it and sat. The dog looked up at him. Daniel stared down at the pad, heart thudding. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the napkin he'd scribbled the numbers on the day before. 8 digits. He keyed them in. A click echoed beneath them, low and mechanical. The hatch creaked, then rose half an inch before stopping. Daniel looked at Shadow. "You've done this before." Shadow didn't move. Inside, the air was cold and metallic, tainted with the scent of mold and long-dead electricity. Daniel shone his flashlight down the narrow staircase, swallowed his fear, and descended. Shadow followed, each paw step echoing like a drumbeat. They emerged into a corridor, walls of concrete reinforced with steel. Along one side, a row of old terminals and smashed monitors. Along the other, kennels. Rusted. Empty. Each marked with a designation. E01, E02. Daniel's light froze on the last one. E07. Shadow's head dipped slightly, then turned away. Daniel stepped closer, brushing dust from the plaque. Subject 07. Enhanced Cognitive Response Canine Unit. Designation, Echohound. He stumbled back, nearly tripping. "You were part of something," he whispered. He turned to the wall of terminals. One was still intact, its casing weathered but whole. He tapped the power button out of instinct. Nothing. Then Shadow approached and nudged a small black box below the desk. Daniel opened it. Inside sat an old portable generator, surprisingly intact. An emergency backup system? He checked the fuel. Nearly empty, but not dry. With shaking hands, Daniel flipped the switch. Lights flickered. The terminal blinked. A login prompt flashed onto the cracked monitor. Daniel typed, "Echohound." Password? He tried the number sequence. Nothing. Tried, subject 07. Still nothing. Finally, he typed, "Shadow." The screen chimed. "Welcome, Drive E. Harper." Daniel's blood turned cold. His wife's name wasn't just a coincidence. Emily Harper. His eyes locked on Shadow. She worked here. The screen loaded a list of files. Most were corrupted. But one folder remained accessible. /final_protocol/. Inside, a single document. Echohound Overview Confidential. He clicked. Project EchoHound was initiated in 2009 to develop bioenhanced surveillance dogs with long-range sensory augmentation and neural memory storage capabilities. Subject 07, Shadow, demonstrated the highest memory retention and autonomous threat analysis of all candidates. Daniel read faster, stomach churning. In 2016, following the classified collapse of Operation Greenwell, Subject 07 was scheduled for decommissioning due to overexposure to traumatic data. Lead scientist Dr. Emily Harper protested and removed the subject from containment under unauthorized conditions. The dog was never recovered. Dr. Harper's employment was terminated under security breach protocols. The room tilted. Shadow had been stolen. By Emily. Smuggled out like contraband. She hadn't just found him. She had rescued him from them. Daniel backed away from the screen. His wife had died in a car accident 2 months ago. Or so he'd been told. Had she been silenced? Back at the house, Daniel sat at his kitchen table in silence, Shadow curled at his feet. His laptop lay open. He had copied what he could from the facility's terminal, just a handful of blurry screenshots and the partial log. And one more thing. A hidden file labeled Playback Point 07. The dog's memory. He clicked it. The video started with static, then focused. The image wasn't from a normal camera, it was from Shadow's own perspective. Grainy but vivid. Audio crackled faintly. The footage showed a lab. Glass walls. Shadow sitting on a table, eyes darting between lab coat. Then Emily. Younger. Hair tied back. Smile tight. She knelt in front of the camera. In front of Shadow. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They don't care about what he's seen. They just want to bury it." She held up a syringe. Shadow flinched. "This will cloud some of your memory, but you'll still know. You'll know what's right. I'm counting on you." She kissed his head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then, doors burst open. Yelling. Shadow turned sharply. Men in black tactical gear. The footage glitched. Cut to darkness. Then headlights. A snowy road. Emily driving. A truck behind her, closing fast. No audio. No screams. Just a final flash of light as the screen whited out. The footage ended. Daniel stared at the screen. His wife's death had been engineered. And this dog, this broken, silent creature, had witnessed everything. Had carried it for years. Buried in his bones, in his fur, in his silence. Shadow had never tried to run away. He'd been trying to go back. Daniel stood from the table, pacing. They would have deleted every copy. Buried the project, scrubbed the files. But Emily had known. She'd embedded the data in Shadow's memory chip. The one the vet couldn't identify. He grabbed his phone and called the veterinary clinic. "Hi, this is Daniel Harper. I brought in a retriever for X-rays 3 days ago, Shadow. You said his implant looked military?" A pause. "Sir. Who is this again?" "Daniel Harper. You saw my dog." "I'm sorry, Mr. Harper, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have any record of a visit by that name or for a dog with that description." Daniel froze. The line went dead. He stared at his phone. They were already wiping the trail. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Shadow lay on the floor beside his bed, breathing slow, eyes open. He turned to the dog. "She trusted you." Shadow blinked. Daniel whispered, "And now I do too." Shadow rose, padded to the edge of the bed, and placed his head on Daniel's arm. There was no wag. Just quiet weight. Steady and loyal. The kind of trust that came only from remembering. Daniel didn't tell anyone where he was going. He packed lightly, flashlight, gloves, camera, bottled water, and slid a USB into his coat pocket, the one containing Shadow's memory playback and the redacted EchoHound files. The woods called to him now, not with mystery, but with grim necessity. Shadow hopped into the passenger seat without being told. His movement was slow, but his eyes stayed fixed ahead the entire drive, as though every bend in the road was a memory resurfacing. They reached the concrete vault again just after sunrise. pale light filtered through a haze of low-hanging mist, and the air felt charged, tense, like an atmosphere waiting for something to happen. The keypad blinked faintly. Daniel keyed in the numbers again. The hatch released with a hiss, as if exhaling a long-forgotten secret. Together they descended. This time, Daniel headed deeper. Beyond the kennels and abandoned lab spaces, a hallway curved sharply left, previously blocked by a fallen beam. Daniel shifted it aside. The flashlight's beam revealed a corridor lined with sealed doors, each one bearing a faded placard and military warnings. Shadow stopped at the last door. Scratched into the metal just above the handle was a symbol, 2 concentric circles around a paw print. Daniel stared at it. This was yours. He found the access panel. No keypad. Just a biometric scanner. Cracked, but still pulsing faintly. Shadow lifted his paw without instruction and placed it on the plate. A soft chime. The door opened. Inside, a chamber no larger than a bedroom. Start. There. At the center stood a reinforced observation chair. Attached above it, an array of wires, electrodes, and something that looked suspiciously like a small projector. Daniel stepped closer. The chair still smelled faintly of antiseptic and fur. On the wall, a final terminal blinked to life as they entered. Its screen displayed a prompt. Memory Transfer Archive, Subject 07. The room hadn't just been Shadow's holding cell. It had been his vault. Daniel tapped the console. A new menu opened. Visual Playback Deep Access, Encrypted. A warning flashed. Neural link required for projection. Then, unexpectedly, the interface scanned the room and flashed green. Override. Dr. Emily Harper confirmed. Memory relay authorized. Daniel froze. He looked down. The collar around Shadow's neck, one he'd never removed, had begun to glow faintly. She'd built a backdoor. A legacy code. Shadow's collar, tied to her credentials, had unlocked the core. The screen faded to black and began. The projection spilled across the walls, 360-degree footage from Shadow's perspective. Daniel watched, transfixed, as the dog's memories unfolded like a forgotten dream. At first, there were simple moments, training exercises in stark white rooms, handlers in military uniforms, Shadow weaving through obstacle courses with precision that seemed impossible for any ordinary dog. Then things darkened. Memory fragments flickered with disjointed urgency, soldiers screaming in foreign languages, rapid gunfire, and smoke. Daniel realized Shadow had been deployed. Not for combat, but for extraction. Recon. Surveillance. A new scene appeared, Emily again. Holding Shadow's head gently between her hands. "You've seen enough," she whispered. "You shouldn't have seen this much." Then, an argument. Shadow hidden beneath a lab table, the camera shaking slightly. Emily shouting. A man's voice, cold, commanding, telling her she didn't get to decide when the program ended. That Shadow wasn't a pet. He was government property. "You turn that dog into a hard drive for war," Emily snapped. "You'll bury your own secrets, but he'll remember everything." "I'm counting on that," the man replied. The next sequence chilled Daniel to his bones. Shadow hidden in a van, watching men in black suits talk to Emily in a parking lot. She's crying. Shaking her head. One of them drops a file on the ground. He zooms in. Daniel can just make out the words. Termination protocol, witness elimination. The men leave. That night, Emily loads Shadow into her car. She's frantic, crying openly and whispering to him. "You're going to be okay. You're going to forget some of this. But not all. I need you to find someone. If something happens to me, find Daniel. He'll know." Daniel's breath caught. She had programmed him to find him. This entire journey, Shadow getting returned, the restlessness, the growling at night, it had all been his way of searching. The projection continued. Emily's car on a snowy road. The same scene from before. But this time, Daniel could hear her breath, shaky, determined. A pair of headlights grew closer in the rearview mirror. A black SUV. Emily's voice trembled. No. No, no, no. A loud crack. The SUV rammed them from behind. The car veered. The screen went white. Daniel's hands trembled. The official report had said, accident due to icy conditions. There had been no ice. There had been murder. The screen shifted one final time. Emily's face appeared in a quiet lab, her voice soft but steady. If you're watching this, it means Shadow found you. It means I didn't make it. Daniel leaned forward, tears stinging his eyes. I embedded everything in his memory. The faces, the names, the files. You'll find proof if you look hard enough. But you have to know, it wasn't just about Shadow. They were testing neural storage for human subjects next. Project Echohound was the beginning, not the end. She smiled faintly. And if he made it to you, Daniel, he's more than a dog. He's family. He protected the truth because he knew it mattered. Because I told him what kind of man you are. Her face blurred with static, then faded. The room fell silent. Daniel stood motionless for a full minute, breath ragged. Everything had changed. Emily's death. The erased vet record. The cold voices on the phone. They were still out there. Shadow sat beside him, watching. Not wagging. Just waiting. Thank you, Daniel whispered. Shadow blinked. Then, slowly, leaned his head against Daniel's leg. They left the facility in silence. The air outside felt different now. Not just heavy, but hunted. Daniel knew this wasn't over. But now, he had everything he needed. Evidence. Coordinates. Memory. And a dog who remembered what they tried to erase. Daniel didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. He didn't return Shadow to the vet. He didn't report anything to the authorities. He kept the lights dim, the curtains drawn, and a hard drive backed up in 3 different places. Each time he tried to rest, the same questions swirled in his mind. Why hadn't they come for him yet? Were they watching? Waiting? Or were they confident no one would believe him? Shadow stayed close. Always near, always watching. No longer restless. He was on guard, pacing at night, sleeping lightly, his ears twitching at the faintest sound. It was clear he hadn't stopped protecting Emily. He had just transferred that loyalty to Daniel now. But Daniel knew he couldn't stay hidden. Emily had trusted him with something more than her memory. She'd trusted him with the truth. On the 4th day, Daniel visited her old university office. Her things had long since been boxed, the room repurposed by someone who had no idea of the life once lived inside. But Daniel wasn't looking for books or photos. He was looking for the locket she always wore, the one she'd stopped taking off even after her resignation. He'd never asked why. She used to say it held the last piece of her sanity. In her storage box, buried between folders and forgotten lab notebooks, he found it. A silver locket, dull with time. Inside, a tiny swatch of her hair, sealed in glass. It was enough. He drove straight to his garage, where he had set up a workstation to access Shadow's implant using the old software he recovered from the facility. The final file on the encrypted chip remained locked, tied not to passwords but to biometric authentication. Emily had designed it so no one could open it without a trace of her DNA. Daniel fed the strand into the reader. The system scanned it silently. A faint tone rang. Authentication confirmed. Final file unlocked. He clicked it. A video began playing. Emily sat in a dim-lit lab, her hair pulled back, her face leaner than Daniel remembered. There were shadows under her eyes. Her voice was steady but raw. If you're watching this, it means Shadow survived. It means you found him. That he found you. And it means I didn't make it. She smiled sadly. I didn't tell you everything when I left the program. I didn't know how. You were already worried about my nightmares. The lies I told about work. But the truth was worse. Behind her, a monitor displayed a series of neural scans. They weren't just teaching Shadow to remember. They were testing memory implants for humans. 4 field agents. 4 civilians. They planned to store selective truth. Make people forget or believe whatever the government needed them to. Erase the inconvenient. Replay the loyal. That's what they said. Her voice cracked. I couldn't let it happen. So I took Shadow and erased all traces. But I embedded everything in him first. Every file I could sneak out. Every image, name, algorithm. He's not just a dog, Daniel. He's a living vault. A witness. Daniel leaned forward, jaw clenched. They'll come for him eventually. They may come for you. But if you release what's in him, the world will know. I just hope it's not too late. She looked away for a long moment. Then, back to the camera. I loved you. I still do. Don't let them bury me. The screen went dark. Daniel didn't hesitate. That night, he uploaded the full EchoHound archive. Not to one source, but to 50. Encrypted email blasts. Whistleblower forums. Decentralized media platforms. He included the video. Her words. Shadow's footage. And one line in the message header. They said he was just a dog. But he remembered everything. Within 24 hours, it went viral. Within 48, government agencies issued hasty statements of denial. Within 72, a senator resigned. Within the week, major news outlets began unraveling the story, calling it Project Memorygate. And within 10 days, Shadow was famous. But Daniel kept him close. A month passed. They moved to the coast, an old house on a bluff overlooking the sea. Quiet. Hidden. Peaceful. Daniel installed sensors and cameras, not out of fear but out of caution. The men who ran EchoHound might be gone, but he doubted the darkness that spawned it had truly died. Shadow was slower now. Age had returned with a vengeance. But he still followed Daniel to the porch each morning, still sat beside him each night. And when Daniel sometimes dreamed of Emily, it was Shadow who woke him gently, placing a paw on his chest as if to say, "She's still here. In both of us." One evening, Daniel took him down to the beach. The sky was painted in orange and gold, and the waves whispered against the shore. Shadow walked beside him with a limp, his breath shallow, but his eyes alert. They sat on a dune, watched the sun dip lower. Daniel scratched the old retriever behind the ears. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Shadow rested his head on Daniel's knee. A long silence passed between them. Comfortable. Familiar. Then Shadow lifted his head. Just slightly. He looked at Daniel one last time. And lay down. His breathing slowed. And stopped. Daniel buried him in the sand beneath a driftwood cross. No collar. No tags. Just a simple inscription. He remembered what they tried to erase. A week later, Daniel received an envelope. No return address. Inside, a photo. Of Shadow. Taken years ago. Beside him, Emily. Smiling. Hand on his back. On the back of the photo, a note in her handwriting. "He was never just a dog. He was the part of me I hoped would survive long enough to find you." Daniel smiled through tears. And whispered into the wind, "He did."